I'm Eric Lipsey, and this is Galt University. Today, I'm here with the CEO of the Oriental Herb Company, Jennifer Pillari. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Very good, very good. Today, I wanted to have you on to talk about what it is to be a single parent, a CEO, as well as owner of a business. Because I know there has to be a lot of women in your situation, and they may really benefit from understanding how to navigate the waters, because I know it can't be easy just as an entrepreneur, and my spouse is in-house and it's still sometimes just really challenging, and that's just with one kid. So I was wondering if you could share with us your journey and what it is to be a single mom and entrepreneur.
Absolutely. It's definitely not easy. And I don't think it's something that any person would want to be, a position that any person would want to be in. Um, I have been a single mom since my son, who's now six and a half, was a baby. He was only one when we got divorced. And we also have two older children. So my girls are 12 and 14, and then my son is 6.5. And I was kind of thrown into the fire. My ex-husband had run most of the finances of O.H.C.O, and I am not a finance person at all. Like, I hate that stuff, to be honest. That is not in my wheelhouse. So I had to very quickly learn how to manage that part of the business in addition to everything else. So that was my first really big challenge. And then just being a mom, like, as any mom knows, it's all consuming. It's like just doing the dishes and the laundry and taking care of your kids is enough. Like that's enough stress on its own. So then you throw in working at all, and then owning a business, which is, I'm not going to say it's harder than a 9 to 5 where you show up at an office, because I think about what that lifestyle would be, and I'm grateful I don't have it. Like, I'm the boss. I can show up and work out clothes like I do every day. Nobody's going to get mad if I'm late. Nobody's going to get mad if I have to go pick up my kids, or someone isn't feeling well and has a day off of school. Someone's got early release. I don't have anyone to answer to. So that part makes it really, really nice. So I'm definitely not saying that running a business is harder than any other job. It just presents some unique challenges because it all comes back to you.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
when things fall apart, you're the one who has to deal with everything. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned over the years, and I continue to learn, is to ask for help, which is really hard for me. And I think is really hard for a lot of people. It's not something that we have any training on or that our culture seems to value. So I've gotten better about that over the past couple of years. And I really have tried to get better about it in the last couple months, because all of a sudden, after 2 years of not really having a cold and flu season because of COVID and the fact that people would get sick and they'd go home and isolate and take a COVID test, as opposed to going to the grocery store and buying Cold Snap, we just had a really rough couple of years. And so this year, things have changed. People are back out in the world. People are back out shopping in stores. And after these years of being masked, I have never, in my time of working for O.H.C.O, which has been since 2007, and I've owned it since 2013, I do not remember a cold and flu season like this one.
Yeah.
It's like every possibility of a pathogen is just out there.
Wow.
Is it COVID? I don't know. I
Right.
mean, it could be. I think a lot of people are getting negative tests now, but then there's strep A and RSV and just the regular flu. And yeah, I mean, we like sick people here at O.H.C.O. And so
It's actually good for business, right?
it's good for business, but yeah, it's really made me have to seek help from
Yeah.
other people.
Now,
And I
how
would
do you
say,
manage that as far as the time is concerned? Because I understand, like I said, you have the three kids, and I know sometimes your husband had, your ex-husband has the children,
yeah,
and just how do you manage that time when you have so many things going on with your business, but you still want to spend time, you want to prioritize your kids, but you still have priorities for your business as well. And I know there's probably some times where, oh, things are smooth and I'm going to be here and then I'm going to be there. And there's times where things just get crazy. It's like, how do you manage that?
first off, I've given up on perfection.
Hmm.
I have no expectation anymore that I will get all the things done. And I won't sacrifice myself anymore, which is something that I used to be willing to do. Stay up until 1, 2 in the morning, then have to get up at 6:30, really run myself down. I don't do that anymore. It's all going to get done eventually. And my first priority has to be my children.
Hmm.
So the sacrifice is a bit to my business, and I'll admit that. I could be doing a much better job. But there are only 24 hours in a day.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, it's like the choice between, oh, I could finish this project and get it done, and that will accelerate this part of my business, or my 14-year-old needs help with her algebra homework.
Right.
I've just gotten a lot more comfortable with saying no.
Hmm.
And for a long time, I didn't say no. And that grew an expectation of everyone around me that I would always be available to do whatever they needed and respond to them quickly. And you have to make a sacrifice somewhere. And I think, unfortunately, for a lot of single mothers who are business owners, they end up making the sacrifice of their business because it's ultimately better than sacrificing the time with their children.
Hmm.
Um,
I
and
think
that's
that's
where,
really interesting that you say that, because I know sometimes when you look at time and money, right? And I remember someone saying to me, maybe a mentor years ago, saying, if you want to know where a person's priorities are, look at where they spend their time and money, you know,
yeah,
because it really is a tell. It doesn't matter what you say, it really is a telltale sign of what is it that you really care about. And I think it's commendable for you to, be able to set those boundaries and say, you know what, I can't be everywhere at once. These are my priorities. And then setting those and sticking with that as well, which I think probably helps as an entrepreneur to an extent, because you can do that without worrying about getting fired.
absolutely. Absolutely. I'm sure if I worked for someone else, I would probably be fired. I mean, I I accept that. The founders of O.H.C.O was a husband and wife couple, and they were really boundaried about their time. Like, they didn't work in the evenings. They worked 9 to 5. They didn't work on the weekends. I mean, I'm sure there are exceptions.
Right.
In general, they were very specific. I remember when I worked in their office, and people used to come and pick up their herbs from the office up in Evergreen, Colorado. And I told someone that they could come pick up their herbs after 5 p.m. And I remember my boss, the owner at the time, Hannah, was like, "Oh no, that'll be the last time this happens. Like, we don't allow that." And that's not at all like the typical Western American mentality. I think it's like, well, if you can make a few extra dollars, who cares if it's, at 7 p.m. or you have to sacrifice your time and your life with your family. Like,
Mhm.
that's what you do. And I appreciated their example because that isn't the way I looked at the world. I
Right.
figured you just keep pushing until you're broken.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I did do that for a while, and I still do that to some extent. But I just learned over the years, you get older and you see things more clearly, and I just don't, it's not important enough to me. I do fine financially. I feel fine about my business. It's not, there are always things to improve. And like I said, there are a lot of sacrifices. Like,
Mhm.
I'm sure that O.H.C.O could be at another level if it had a different owner. And I don't say that really regretfully, because it is what it is.
Mhm.
And uh, I still have time. Like, my kids are getting older. The girls particularly, they're more interested in their friends now than they are. I'm getting a little more freedom, and I'm also just getting that confidence to ask for help. So I don't think O.H.C.O is just going to flatline and stay where it is forever. I think that we
Mhm.
could really grow. Um, but it's not my number one priority. And I think another thing I learned from the founder was, one time she said, um, this was back, in the 90s or 2000, she was like, the Iraq war is a tragedy. The fact that this person didn't get their cold snap on time is not a tragedy. And it's true. People can calm down. Like, we're so used to now this Amazon world. And I
Mhm.
always say to the people who like do shipping for me, we are not Amazon.
Mhm.
We're not. I'm not
Right.
guaranteeing today that it's going to be at your door.
Right. Yeah, and then even when you get it in 2 days, people will want it in 1 day. It's never fast enough. Regardless to how fast it becomes, they'll still want it faster. You know?
They do. They do.
Yeah.
And I mean, I also feel like in most parts of the country, we have retail stores that you can go buy it in.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Or you can be resourceful. And if I'm not responding fast enough for you, like, you can find other ways. And also, you're going to be okay.
Right.
Going to be okay.
Yeah.
And during COVID was really hard, because March 2020 was like a banner month for us, of course,
Mhm.
because lockdown is starting, everyone is losing their minds, they're hoarding, they are overbuying, and we couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
I mean, March is usually when we slow down, it is not when we speed up.
Mhm.
So we did not have enough inventory. I mean, it was a disaster. And I did something that I said I'd never do. And I sold every single bottle of Cold Snap in my possession. I mean, I sold our sample.
I think I remember that. I remember going to Vitamin Cottage and seeing samples of Cold Snap on
Yeah,
the, on the shelves.
yeah. It's like, here, just do, this is all we have left. Yeah, we
Right.
sold all of our sample packs, which are supposed to be used for promotional materials, not for resale. We sold everything. I didn't have Cold Snap for the first time in 20 something years, because I have taken Cold Snap religiously since
Mhm.
2001.
Yeah.
So it was the first time in almost 20 years that I personally didn't have any Cold Snap. And people would call and they would give me their sob story on why they needed it more than
Right.
anyone else. And I am such a sucker for that kind of thing. I would listen to their story, and I would be like, we would just be dividing, like, okay, this person really needs Cold Snap. But our orders were taking like up to 2 months
Yeah.
to get out. It
Yeah.
was chaos.
It's
So
like it's a good problem, but then the factories are really backed up and slow too. So that I'm sure that probably made things a little bit challenging as well.
yeah, it did. And people just get so angry. I'm always grateful that I waited tables for a really long time. I worked in the restaurant industry for like 10 years. And it really taught me a lot. Like, I think that everyone should work in the restaurant industry.
Hmm.
I think a lot of people, it's interesting to me when people act like being a server or a bartender is like a below them type of thing to do,
Yeah,
because that is not true.
that
Like,
can't be easy.
no, and you can hone so many skills
Hmm.
doing that. Like, you are in charge of your own income to a certain extent. I mean, you can learn so much about customer service. You can learn how to read people.
Yeah.
And I feel like one of the things I learned from waiting tables is like, sometimes I might not have what they want, but at least if I give them something,
Hmm.
at least if I communicate with them, like, the worst thing to do to a table in a restaurant is to ignore them. If you're
Right.
completely slammed and you're so overwhelmed and you know you won't really be able to take their order, I mean, I feel like your ship is already sinking if you just don't even engage with them
Right.
because you don't want to admit. So I was always like, walk over to the table. Hey, I'm a little behind. I'll be
Right.
right with you. We're going to get you some water. And that's kind of how I treat our customers. I'm like, I
Right.
am so sorry. I am unavailable for what you need from me right now. And I will be.
Yeah.
Like, let's see what we can get you started with right now. I'll try to point you in a direction.
So this basically teaches you excellent communication skills as well, because that is so important. I had this experience recently where, and it was a relatively, I mean, well, it was a nice restaurant, and the people, they were all frazzled. Everything was just in disarray, and no one said anything. They act like it wasn't an issue at all. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I'm not, me, I'm the most patient person in the world, but I'm like, you know what? If I'm paying for this, I expect, a certain amount of service, or at least acknowledge that something's not right. Don't just
Yeah.
pretend like it's all good. So that's good on you for having that skill and being able to do things like that. Now, do you feel that that skill you learned in the restaurant industry as a server helped with parenting as well?
It does. Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely very communicative with my kids. And I do have to tell them regularly, look, mom's got to do this right now.
Hmm.
I'm not trying to ignore you. I'm not trying to dismiss your feelings.
Hmm.
I'm not trying to minimize whatever drama you have going on. But like, I've got to do this for me right now.
Hmm.
And I hope that that teaches them those skills so that they don't become people pleasers. Because
Yes.
I think there's like a lot of people in this country who are this mixed, it's like mixed between a people pleaser and an avoidant. Like, they figure that not saying anything or not doing anything is like the path of least resistance,
Yeah.
or they're just always trying to like m- tell people what they want to hear,
Right.
even if they have no intention of doing that.
Right. Yeah.
And
That's
I try
horrible.
to avoid that.
Uh-huh. Well, that's a great thing to avoid, and I think that's why we get along. Because I, when people do that kind of thing to me, I'm like, oh my God, I cannot have people around me who are just like, always telling you, oh yeah, I got this. I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that, and then they never do it. And it's like, okay, so this is just who you are. You're just talking, right? You don't want to say no, so you keep
Yeah.
saying yes, and then it's like, but you're not gonna do it. It is just, you just come to expect that from people sometimes. But yeah, so it's that's a great thing. Just being able to tell people, it's like, hey, something came up, blah 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 blah. It's just communicating. And a lot of times it's so understandable when people communicate, but some people just go ghost, and then you never know what's going on. So you don't know what to make of what happened. So you're left there with just like,
And I'll admit, I ghost. And I will tell people straight up, I am not trying to ignore you. Like, I am just buried. And I always tell people, I'm sure I've told you, don't be afraid to hound me.
yeah.
You're not going to offend me. You're going to text me 3 times on the same topic. I don't care. I know who I am. I'm
Yeah.
busy. I don't
Yeah.
respond
And
texting
that's not
about it.
ghosting. Ghosting is when you don't, you're like, you're just gonna ignore everything on purpose.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, I do understand that technique too. Sometimes you
yeah,
just want to check out and
yeah.
not
It's like
deal.
the only time I'll do that is when somebody keeps approaching me trying to sell me something and I've already told them no. And they
Yeah,
keep going. I'm like, okay, well, you could just have this conversation with yourself at this point. I'm done. You know,
definitely,
it's
definitely.
like you almost tell your kids, it's like asked and answered, you know.
Yeah.
We've had
I
this
think the
conversation
best
already.
way you can teach your kids is really by your actions.
Yes.
No, and not so much your words. Like a lot of people have really nice words,
Hmm.
but if it doesn't align with their actions, and my
Absolutely.
kids right now do not appreciate me. I know that. Like they don't see how hard I work.
Yeah.
They don't, but when they're older, I know that they're going to look back and realize, like, wow, mom did all of this stuff. Mom managed all of these things and managed to make sure that we were fed. And, because I only have them 50% of the time, I think I go a little overboard in wanting to be like mom. Like,
Yeah.
I like cooking for them and cleaning for them and probably things that they should be doing for themselves at this point. And I know they do them for themselves at their father's house, but I just like to take care of them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and there's always a fine line with that, but I have no doubt that one day they will look back and appreciate what I did and also hopefully have learned something.
Mhm.
Because it's really easy to let your kids become spoiled in
Yeah,
this
oh yeah.
world. Even
Absolutely.
if you don't have a lot of money,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's just like a world of stuff.
Right. Right.
So I
Yeah.
didn't grow up like that. I mean, I didn't get whatever I wanted whenever I wanted.
No. No, I
So
definitely didn't grow up like that. I tell people, look, my patches had patches on them. That's how poor I was. Hand me down from generational hand me downs. Is how I grew up. So yeah, I totally get that. Yeah.
so that it's always kind of fighting that beast in this world, I think.
Yes. Well,
Just
that's good. I think a lot of it is just being conscious of it, and understanding that your kids, like you said, they are mimicking you almost to where even when it doesn't seem like they're paying attention, they're noticing and they learn how to respond to things. And when they get older, they may deviate from that and start to respond to things differently. But a lot of what we're teaching our kids, like you said, are coming from the things that we do on a day in and day out basis. So when it comes to parenting, there is so much less of what's said than what's actually done.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really the most important job that I have. Um, especially, well, every stage is different, but this teenage stage, which I know you're close to with your daughter,
Just started, yeah.
the way they do life is very different from when we were kids. And I know every generation says that, but like,
Mhm.
I think this one is particularly striking because of all the technology
Right. Yeah.
and that, how can reality beat whatever is on their screen?
Right.
And I feel like as a parent, I'm always trying to show them that like reality is super cool too. Like doing stuff is
Right.
really interesting. Learning how to work with your hands and engaging
Right.
in conversation, like that's actually better than sitting and staring at your iPad.
Yes. And it's so easy to get caught up. It's almost like an addiction or something where
Oh
if
yeah.
they spend too much time doing that, that it just becomes, they just gravitate to it automatically. And then it gets harder and harder to pull them away from it. And, and I know there are certain things that change. Like I'm sure we had things as kids that we probably got attached to. you know,
Of course. Yeah.
regardless of what it might have been something totally non-tech because the technology wasn't so advanced as it is
Yeah.
today. So I
Or
definitely
even
didn't have access to
TV
those.
back then. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember I definitely watched a lot of TV as a kid,
Yeah.
but it feels different, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
When before the kids had phones and they would just use iPads and stuff, I instead of like shouting for everyone to come out of their rooms, I just shut the Wi-Fi off.
Yeah.
In like 5, 10 minutes, everyone just comes out. Like, does anyone know what happened to the Wi-Fi? And I'm like, oh, good, you're all here. Now we
Yeah.
can do something else.
And then speaking of boundaries too, like we've even tried to establish this thing in our house where it's like, okay, on these nights we do XYZ. It's like, yep, you can do that. You can go play your video games, but on this night, it's family time. You know, where we're doing stuff as a family. We can play games, we can talk or whatever, but trying to establish some sort of boundary so that it's not always, this obsession over, and even for us as adults, because it's like a lot of my work is online.
I
A lot of
know
the things I
that
have
is
to do is on a computer. So even for me, it's like, okay, you need to step away from the technology and do something else, you know.
that is another lead by example thing. And my kids have called me out on it. They're like, but you are on your phone. And I'm like, when you're a CEO, you're gonna also
Right.
be allowed to be on your phone.
Oh yeah.
Like, sorry, this is just the way it is. I think we also forget that like we were raised without these things. We
Mhm.
figured out what to do.
Oh yeah,
So I
absolutely.
think we as parents think like, oh no, if I need to get something done, or if, there's downtime or whatever, especially as a single parent where there are occasions where it's like, I just need to get some stuff done and not have anyone bother me. And okay, I'll allow them to be on their technology then. And it's like, they don't have to be. They can
Right.
find other stuff to do.
Yes.
We found other stuff to do.
Mhm.
Our parents had to get stuff done. I don't remember my parents like playing with me and engaging with me all the time at
No,
all.
well, most of the time it was get away from me, speak when you're spoken to, go outside and play.
Go outside and play.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
don't come back till the sun goes down, sort of
Oh
thing.
yeah, totally.
Yeah,
I grew up in the woods, so I feel
me
like
too.
they just like locked the door and put us outside.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we spent a lot of time outside playing. It wasn't, yeah, it's just, and watching TV. There was only 2.5 channels, and that was with the youngest holding the antenna, to even get that. So, yeah, so we spent a lot of time, playing outside and whatnot. Only if it was raining or something like that, where we allowed usually to just be inside the house.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I know we should take some more lessons from that. I do try to remind myself of the world that I grew up in
Mhm.
and I survived.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
anyway, thank you for asking me all these questions and giving me a space to talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully somebody will listen to this and well, I know someone will listen to it, but hopefully they'll be able to draw some value from the conversation and be able to apply it to both their business and the parenting to help set some boundaries for themselves. Because it seems like that's the biggest thing. It's just having those boundaries and priorities. Boundaries and priorities seems to be
Yeah,
the thing coming from this conversation. So yeah, so thank you
definitely. I
very much
mean,
for coming on.
any business owner, I think, like I always say, I could work 24 hours a day,
Mhm.
7 days a week, and have someone just slide food on a plate underneath the door to me. I really could. I have that much work that I could do.
Mhm.
But it's like, no, I'm not living in that world. I like other things besides my computer.
Thank you very much again, Jen. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your experience with us and how you navigate the parenting and entrepreneurship or single parenting and entrepreneurship. I really
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
All right.